Welcome to my YouTube channel, Donkey here, and today we are continuing with another one of our discussions about tanks, presentations about tanks, how you wanna call it. And we are going to talk about tanks. Usually people forget, usually focus more on Shermans, T-34s, Panthers, Tigers, rolling across Europe. But in Pacific, there was lesser known force fought from the shadows. These were the tanks of the Imperial Japanese Army, often overlooked, yet with their own story, struggle, and innovations. Let's go to the first one. Type 95 Hago. First Type 95 Hago, a light tank weighing just about 7.4 tons, armed with a 37mm gun and moving respectable 45 km per hour. Hago was Japan's most widely produced tank of the war. 12mm of armor at its thickest made it vulnerable to even small arms fire. Still performed well early on conflicts, especially against infantry in China and Pacific. This tank was produced before the Second World War, wasn't built for Second World War tank battles, but if we look at it as a pre-war tank, as a pre-war light tank, what other countries had pre-war, this was one of the best in the world. US had, I think, light tank M2, I think was called, something like that. Its main armament was a 50 caliber machine gun for a long time. The same with the British. Their main light tank at the beginning of Second World War, the main armament 50 caliber machine gun. Hago had a 37mm cannon actually, and as well as a machine gun. So it was pretty ahead of its time. Was quite a bit faster than, let's say, Soviet T-26. So if you look at it as pre-war lenses, it was one of the best tanks in the world, but then it got outdated, like tank development in Japan slowed down a bit during the war. I'm gonna tell you more about it at the end of the video. Let's go to the next one. Type 97 Chiha, considering the backbone of the Japanese armored tank forces. Had 15 tons with crew of 4. Its 57mm gun was decent for early war conditions, but against Allied tanks, Chiha struggled. To compensate, Japanese developed the improved Chiha Kai with a high velocity 47mm gun. Again, a pre-war tank developed before the Second World War. If you look at it from that perspective, really good tank. I'm going to say now, I'm sorry if I'm butchering some names of these tanks. I'm Slovenian, it's Japanese, I am probably reading it the second time in my life, the tank names, so I'm sorry if I'm doing it the disservice. Let's move on. Type 1 Chihe, heavier at 17.2 tons with upgraded armor, 50mm of it and 47mm gun, though improved production delays and resources shortages. Only few saw combat, mostly defending the home islands, and still was, behind the Sherman, really, if you look at it. Let's move to the next one. Type 3 Chih-Nu, Japan's answer to the Sherman with a 75mm gun. It was the most powerful Japanese tank mass produced during the war, but by the time it rolled off the assembly lines in 1944, the war had turned and most Chih-Nu tanks were held back to defend Japanese mainland. You can see here this was a 1944 development of a tank. If you compare it to what other countries were starting to field in 1944, was in US you had development of T-29, T-30 heavy tanks. You had the IS-2s hitting the battlefield. You have the Tiger 2s in Europe. And you had a development of Centurion really towards its end. So you really see Japan got held behind when it comes to tank development during the Second World War. Desperation breeds innovation. The Type 4 Chito, a 30-ton tank with a thick 75mm frontal armor and an improved 75mm gun, was a formidable design, rivaling the M4 Sherman, but even larger was Type 5 Chari, a 37 tons, Japan's ultimate tank concept, but only handful of prototypes were made. As you can see, I struggle even to find a photo of a gun turned towards the front. So none saw combat. Also late in the war, Japanese tanks of World War II tell a story not of domination but of adaptation and perseverance under immense odds. Thought often as outgunned and under armor, these steel beasts fought a war Japan was never truly prepared for on land. This is a really important piece here. Japanese war effort was mainly focused on sea and air combat, and tanks were good enough to fight in China. What they were coming up against were majority some M3 Stewarts, some T-26s, Panzer IIs, things like that. So Japanese tanks were coming against tanks there rarely anyways. In Pacific, the main fight was on the seas, in the air. In Southeast Asia, tanks weren't really the main component of an army. Because of the jungle and the hard terrain, you couldn't use tanks as they were supposed to be used. So Japan had limited resources as it was, steel, oil, and they had to prioritize things like air and sea power to fight the Americans, to build ships, to build planes. At the end of the day, to build rifles, machine guns. Tanks take a lot of materials, a lot of steel, a lot of workers, a lot of money to produce, to develop, to field. At the end of the day, for you to put a Chari on a ship transport, you are basically taking off 2-3 infantry platoons that you could use in an island defense. So that's the process you need to make from Japanese perspective. They had to adapt to the conditions of their resources, availability, where they were fighting, who they were fighting, what they were fighting. Shermans were really rare opponent, really, for Japanese tanks. any tank was a rare opponent for Japanese tanks. Only exception is Soviet invasion of Manchuria then later in the war. But that was, things were going bad already, and going with Cheetos and whatever against the 3485s and IS-2s with crews that were fighting the Wehrmacht across Europe for past 4 or 5 years, you can't compare them. Japanese armored uh, forces barely saw any tank-to-tank combat, and those who saw it didn't make it out of the islands, or it was rare against poorly trained crews with bad tanks in China. So tanks weren't really the priority. That's why I'm coming to for Japanese Imperial Army. The priority was infantry, artillery, things that they can defend with. Tanks are really offensive in most cases, so they were defending Pacific. I guess they were on an offense somehow in China, but they got bogged down then, and there was kind of stalemate. So they were on a defensive on all fronts. So infantry, artillery, things like that, focusing on more asymmetric tactics. Was the priority there. They wouldn't be able to match the US or USSR tank for tank in numbers and quality. They were too far behind once the fights with tanks were happening. So, and then the nukes were dropped. So the later war tanks like Cheeto, Chai-Nu were never able to see combat because they were held back on the main islands to defend Japan. And so, but the nukes were dropped, so they never had a chance to fight really. They were decent tanks. Chino here would knock out a Sherman, no problem. Would knock out an M3 Lee, no problem. So, but he never got a chance to do what was made for. But let's wrap up this video here. I put my 2 cents on Japanese tanks. I hope you like it. And see you next time. Please like, subscribe, and thank you for watching. Donkey out. To the next.